All right, everybody, welcome back to the #1 television program in the history of the entire universe. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown. All three books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today, I am going to be reviewing Twilight Eyes by Dean Koontz. This book came out in 1985. It was one of the very first Dean Koontz books I ever read, and for the longest time, probably my favorite Dean Koontz, even though I only have read it once. Until this week, I read it again, so I've now read it twice, but for the longest time, I always considered this my favorite Dean Koontz book of all time. And it's probably the most Stephen King-ish book that Dean Koontz ever did. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so let's talk about these covers, because this is the original 1985 cover. This is the re-release that they've done. Obviously, I like the original 1985 cover better. I mean, it just looks like a cool, old-school horror novel from the 80s with the font and the circus, the carnival in the background. It's just super cool. Author photo on the back. This one is just not even, it's just dumb. I don't like it at all. I don't even know what the image is behind the type. It's just a swirl of bullshit. However, the author photo on the back is kind of cool. He's got his little doggy. Does not here. Looks about the same. I mean, the dude looks 1985 to 2023. Dude looks about the same. Anyway, okay, so, we already talked that this was once one of my favorite Dean Koontz books, and now, you know, it's, my second reading. What did I think the second time through? Well, Dean Koontz says that this novel sprung from his youth, living next to a field that hosted an annual carnival in the summertime every year, and how he would sneak away and go into the carnival, sneak into the carnival, and spent a lot of time at this carnival every year that it would roll through town. It was a big event in his life, a lot of memories he created, and he always wanted to set a book within a carnival setting, and he also wanted to set the book in the 1960s when he was a kid. So this book is set in the 1960s. Cold War era, height of the Cold War, the Cuban Missile Crisis. All the characters are very, very aware of the Cuban Missile Crisis that's going on as this book is going on, and just the fear, the way that they talk about it, the way that they think that their world is going to end soon. I mean, they really, back in the day, during that time in the 60s, with that whole Cuban Missile Crisis, literally everybody in the United States thought nuclear war was going to end the world at any moment, and these characters really feel that. And I think that that theme, that overlying dread and doom that engulfs the story is kind of like, I think it's thematic. I think it's thematic throughout the story. Anyway, it starts out with, oh, not only that, but the book takes place shortly after the Kennedy assassination, which also is a huge deal. I mean, literally, you've got this Cuban Missile Crisis, this Kennedy assassination thing. I mean, it's just you know, I mean, all of these things, it takes place within all of this range of time. And, yeah, I mean, people were freaked out back then, you know. Starts out with Slim McKenzie, which is not his real name. It's a made-up name. Because he's on the run. He is on the run because he's 17 years old and he killed his uncle. And he's on the run. And, he comes to a carnival. Well, he sees goblins. His big problem is he sees goblins in people. But they look like normal people. It's kind of like the old Battlestar Galactica thing where the Cylons looked like normal people. Well, in Slim McKenzie's mind, goblins are living in human bodies and they look like normal people, but only he can see them. Or is it all made up in his mind? Is he just mentally ill? Because whenever he sees one of these goblins posing as a human, he has to kill it, which he does. He comes to the carnival. He sees a goblin in the carnival, and he kills the goblin. And but then he's enamored with the carnival itself, and he wants to work at the carnival because he figures this is a good way to make some money. I'm on the run. I don't want to get caught. I can blend in the carnival with all these freaks. And I mean, and then the book does have a myriad of characters that are just like, you know, you got your dwarf and your fat man and all your hustlers and all of this stuff going on in the carnival. And he really sort of blends into this carnival, and it sort of becomes his home, his family. And but he's got this problem where he sees normal looking people he thinks are goblins, and he has to murder them. Now he meets a girl named Rhea Raines. And this is the part of the story I like, because I really enjoy this relationship between 17-year-old runaway / murderer Slim McKenzie and this other sort of stray waif runaway named Rhea, who's a female, and they're sort of their coming of age relationship as they're both young people and they're both working at this carnival. And does Rhea herself see goblins? Well, I mean, because the goblins just seem to be everywhere. Not only goblins, but now suddenly now there's vampires and stuff. So we've got this great coming of age tale set in the 60s in a carnival. This is why I say it's the most Stephen King-ish book of all of the Dean Koontz novels. If you would have put Twilight Eyes, Stephen King, in 1985 on this, and told me this was one of Stephen King's 80s horror novels, I would have been like, yeah, it is. It really is. It reads exactly like a Stephen King horror novel set in the 80s. Which is a good thing, because I love Stephen King horror novels set in the 80s. It's got a lot of 1960s nostalgia. I've pretty much told you what the plot is these characters that may or may not be mentally ill, that may or may not really be seeing actual goblins and vampires, and killing a lot of people and chasing people through the carnivals, and a lot of jumps and scares and things coming out of the woodwork and the shadows and what's real and what's not real. And how will this love affair work out? Successful? Will everybody die in the end? Those are the questions in Twilight Eyes. I enjoyed this. Probably, like I said, it was one of my favorites, if not my favorite Dean Koontz novel for 30 years. Now, having reread it, I still say it would be in my top 5 Dean Koontz novels. Although having just reread the book Watchers, which I thought was so fucking good, I would put Watchers above this. I just thought Watchers was such a great thriller. And this is more, I mean, Watchers was a thriller / horror. This is a horror / horror novel. Still gets a 10 out of 10, though. It's just a fantastic fucking book.